tuna surprise. If you think you're eating healthy, CBC News has a special report on mercury levels in the canned fish. An ultimatum from the head of the Air India inquiry. Justice John Major says he'll shut it down if the government doesn't release some secret documents. Celia Franca, the founder of the National Ballet, dies at age 85. And Fortress France.
If we are weak, they will try to find a way to get in.
The French government wants illegal immigrants to get out and stay out. But French citizens are willing to risk criminal charges to help them. Don Murray with a documentary.
The National. Here is Peter Mansbridge.
Good evening. Maybe it's because it's easy or easy on the wallet. Either way, canned tuna inevitably pops up in a lot of Canadian lunches every day. But tonight there are new warnings from Health Canada concerning one type of tuna and just how much you should be eating. This, as a CBC News investigation reveals that the sandwich you had today might not be as healthy as you think. Jolyn Shane has the story.
Kevin Walker is one health-conscious guy. He used to eat 2 to 3 cans of tuna a day to get the maximum health benefits from tuna's omega-3 fatty acids.
It's cheap, it's a good source of protein.
His enthusiasm dampened after a chance meeting with prominent toxicologist David Lane at the University of Ottawa. Lane was concerned about potentially high mercury levels in Kevin's body. Indeed, Lane says all consumers should know how much mercury is actually in canned tuna. So, we asked him to conduct a test for us, the first public survey of its kind in Canada, to find out for ourselves. We bought 60 cans of various brands of albacore tuna and stripped off the labels to ensure a blind test. The tuna came from 9 grocery stores in Vancouver, Winnipeg, and Toronto.
I was surprised. They were a good deal higher than I'd thought.
Government guidelines state that canned tuna should contain no more than 0.5 parts per million of mercury. But in our tests, 13% of the cans exceeded that figure. One can had nearly double the limit. And the lab found that another 10% of the cans had just below the limit.
We're looking at 25% of the tuna that was sent to my lab was something to be concerned about. Clearly, these tuna should not be eaten on a regular basis.
The Canadian Food Inspection Agency is responsible for monitoring mercury in retail fish.
Our view was the results don't represent a surprise.
The CFIA says it knows albacore tuna is higher in mercury than the more popular light tuna. It says the occasional can of tuna will exceed the guidelines. It's inevitable.
I'm not saying that compliance can never improve. What I'm saying is we will not get 100% when we're dealing with a ubiquitous environmental contaminant.
In the U.S., several states have issued advisories to consumers, including special advice for pregnant women and small children, because too much mercury can cause neurological damage, especially to children and fetuses. Some states say 1 can of albacore a week. Rhode Island says none for pregnant women and children. Health Canada has had no such warnings. That is, until now. After learning of our lab results, Health Canada declined to be interviewed for this story. The federal minister didn't want to talk either.
Yeah, well, I'm just going this way right now.
Then today, a sudden change.
We are making available this information right now because of the interest in canned albacore tuna in particular.
After more than 2 years of reviewing the science on canned tuna, this afternoon, Health Canada issued new guidelines for consumers. No more than half a cup of albacore tuna a week for small children, no more than 2 cups for pregnant women.
I was really surprised to see it so high.
As for Walker, his tests revealed mercury levels 4 times what the U.S. government would consider safe. He's not impressed that Canadian guidelines have taken so long.
I think it's irresponsible on Canada's part, the Health Canada, for not educating the public about the concern of consuming too much tuna. And I personally think it's worrisome.
Meanwhile, the Canadian Food Inspection Agency has asked us to share any information that would identify the cans. It's planning to trace back all the tuna that exceeded government guidelines and may pull other cans off the shelves. Jolyn Shane, CBC News, Winnipeg.
It was to be a last hope for answers and perhaps closure for the families of the Air India victims. Now the judge in charge of the Air India inquiry is threatening to shut it down. Justice John Major says government lawyers are censoring so many portions of key documents and testimony that the investigation could ultimately prove meaningless. Susan Bonner reports.
For more than 2 decades, they've waited for answers. The families of the Air India victims pushed first for justice, and when that failed, a public inquiry. Now that too could fail. The inquiry's head, former Supreme Court Justice John Major, blames government secrecy.
I have reached the conclusion that if the documents remain, in a manner of speaking, blacked out, there is no way I can carry out my mandate.
The documents he referred to sat at his side, 42 binders full, 15,000 pages from CSIS, the RCMP, and several government departments. In these pages, the story of how the attack happened while key suspects were under surveillance, and why the criminal investigation crumbled. But so much has been blacked out that the inquiry would be forced behind closed doors and
disappear into the quicksand of bureaucracy.
It's a question of protecting national security, argued this government lawyer.
The government takes its obligation in this regard extremely seriously, and in that regard has in good faith redacted documents or portions of documents.
We are sick and tired of the politics that contributes to shroud the truth and prevent the laying of the blame on those who ought to be held responsible.
Bal Gupta lost his wife, son Sushil, his mother.
I grew up 2/3 of my life without my mother, who was murdered.
They worry about a cover-up.
We don't want a charade. We don't want a whitewash. An inquiry should be a public inquiry.
The Prime Minister, who called the inquiry last spring, reacted quickly to quell what could become a political problem.
I've instructed my National Security Advisor to meet with people in the various departments to impose a non-restrictive interpretation of the law and to expedite resolution of this dispute as quickly as possible.
The Commissioner has given the lawyers just 2 weeks to come up with a compromise. As for the Harper government, it may have been good politics to call the public inquiry. Having it fall apart would be anything but. Susan Bonner, CBC News, Ottawa.
2 days after the Prime Minister said a series of attack ads would remain on television, it appears some will be pulled. The Conservatives say they will take the French ads off the air in Quebec once an election in that province is called. The ads attack the federal Liberals on many fronts. Critics say they could help elect the Parti Québécois. The Tories say they don't want to interfere in a Quebec election. There is growing frustration over the strike by CN rail workers. The federal government has appointed a mediator to try to resolve the dispute, and CN asked the Industrial Relations Board to call the action by 2,800 workers illegal. That request was rejected tonight. This as the strike moves into its second week, and as Ron Charles reports, it's taking a toll on those who rely on the rail lines.
The train tracks leading to this Manitoba grain terminal are covered with pristine, undisturbed snow. The strike at CN Rail means the trains aren't running here, so grain is moving by truck. That's already cost Martin Harder's grain terminal an extra $50,000 to $70,000.
We've had 3 tough years in prairie agriculture, and now finally we have a break. And to have something like this happening is just unacceptable.
In the far north, these trucks deliver millions of liters of fuel oil to Canada's diamond mines. It can only be delivered on this ice road, open for just 2 months every winter. But the strike has caused refineries in the south to slow down shipments.
We're very sensitive to having a short season, and 2 months is a short season anyway, so it's something very critical for us to get that fuel in.
The strike has also left Canada's busiest port in the doldrums. The port of Vancouver is so congested with cargo, it's hard to move anything into the terminals. That's having a domino effect. This shipping terminal is full of wood that should have already been long gone. The strike has kept it piled here, and while it's here, the mills can't ship more.
We can't ship, and we have no place to store product. The option pretty well called for you. You got to shut down.
Industries across the country facing millions of dollars in losses have been calling on the federal government to get these trains moving again. At least moving faster than CN managers have been able to operate them so far. And with this strike entering its second week, Ottawa seems to be listening.
We cannot stay the situation going very far like this, and by today I will meet my colleagues and we will analyze every options who are before us. We will have to take decision pretty soon about that.
Not soon enough for the people at Superior Propane. The Montreal company is a major propane distributor and relies heavily on CN to bring the gas in from the west. The gas is used to heat greenhouses, barns, even homes and fireplaces.
Every day sometimes we're close of not having enough gas coming to this region.
CN's 2,800 striking workers say they are demanding better working conditions, but CN's customers are warning a prolonged strike could cause the whole economy to run out of steam. Ron Charles, CBC News, Toronto.
Coming up, keeping fit and having fun again. Canadian soldiers in Kandahar were attacked twice within 30 minutes late last night, resulting in 2 firefights and the deaths of an Afghan civilian and a police officer. No Canadians were hurt, but many of the soldiers involved are new to the mission, having only arrived in Afghanistan in the past few weeks. Tom Perry reports.
The streets of Kandahar are bustling today. Last night, they were a battlefield. The Canadian military says a convoy passing through the city came under fire twice.
The first attack occurred at 11:16 p.m. local time, when the convoy was engaged by small arms and rocket-propelled grenade fire.
The convoy pushed on, but according to the military, was attacked again.
Approximately 27 minutes later, and 3 kilometers down the road, the convoy was forced to halt when a Canadian vehicle became disabled as a result of damage sustained from the first attack. It was during this halt that the second attack occurred and the convoy was engaged by small arms fire.
The Canadians opened fire, killing an Afghan police officer and a civilian. Traffic officer Yar Mohammed says the civilian who was shot was a homeless man. The military says both he and the police officer ignored warnings to stay away from the convoy.
The deaths of the civilian and the Afghan National Police officer are most regretted, and we offer our condolences to their families.
Canadian troops were involved in 2 other shootings last week, in which a civilian was killed and an Afghan soldier wounded.
What we need to do and what we're looking to do is communicate with the Afghan people and ensure that they understand that, like last night's situation, wasn't brought about by us. It wasn't our fault.
There are still many unanswered questions about what happened on the streets of Kandahar last night and different versions of the events that led to the fatal shootings. What's certain is 2 people are dead. Everything else is under investigation. Tom Perry, CBC News, Kandahar.
A number of soldiers who've completed tours in Afghanistan were officially honored for their bravery today. The Governor General presented 6 military valor decorations, the first time they've been presented since their creation in 1993. 2 soldiers received the Star of Military Valor, Canada's highest award for bravery after the Victoria Cross. Major William Fletcher of St. Albert, Alberta, and Sergeant Patrick Tower of Sydney, BC. Both later spoke of the battles which earned them the honors.
It wasn't just me, it was, my whole platoon, with our attachments from the reconnaissance platoon, and it was everyone together, working together and fighting together that, led to our success that day.
We're supposed to go towards the sound of the guns when everybody else runs away. So, do we award someone for that? The award is in achieving the mission.
4 soldiers received the Medal of Military Valor: Sergeant Michael Denine, Master Corporal Colin Fitzgerald, Private Jason Lamont, and Captain Derek Prohar. 33 soldiers received meritorious service decorations, including Captain Nicola Goddard, who was honored posthumously. Twin explosions today on a train known as the Friendship Express. It runs between India and Pakistan. The fires that followed killed at least 66 people, most of them from Pakistan. So far, no one has claimed responsibility for the attack near New Delhi. The CBC's Rohit Gandhi has the details.
The Samjhauta Express is a symbol of improving relations between India and Pakistan. Today it became a symbol of pain and tragedy. The train was on its way from New Delhi to Attari, a border town near Pakistan. From there, passengers were to get on a cross-border train for Pakistan. Authorities say 2 separate explosions started fires in 2 rail cars. Just as the train stopped, I saw smoke coming out, says this injured passenger. I started screaming and telling passengers to run and get out. We helped, says this witness, but none of them survived. Police say small explosives were used to light a mixture of fuel oils and chemicals. They add more explosive devices were found on other carriages. As the fire spread, people scrambled to escape. Onlookers say many weren't able to make it because this rail car's windows have iron bars on them. Some were able to escape through an emergency exit. Most bodies have been burnt beyond recognition. The Indian government called the attack sabotage.
Government of India strongly condemns the blasts in train number 4001, that is the Delhi-Attari Express.
And there was quick condemnation from Pakistan.
Horrendous act of terrorism, which everybody would condemn.
The bombings come on the eve of the visit of the Pakistani Foreign Minister for peace talks. Both countries insist those talks will go ahead. Rohit Gandhi, CBC News, Divana, Northern India.
Frank Paul's life ended tragically in a Vancouver alley, soaking wet, drunk, and alone. His death prompted calls for a public inquiry, demands for changes in the way police treat the homeless. 8 years later, some are still haunted by Paul's death, including the man who was one of the last to see him alive. Now, as Chris Brown reports, he's come forward to tell CBC News his story.
These images capture the final hours of Frank Paul in December 1998 as he crawled into the Vancouver police station, too drunk to walk. He would later leave, only to return a few hours later.
That's me.
Corrections officer Greg Thorold is one of those shown on the tape dragging Paul behind him. He agreed to speak to CBC News for the first time publicly about the events that led to Paul's death.
I said to him, I said, Frank, we're going to take you home. Right? Don't worry, Frank, we're going to take care of you.
But that did not happen. Thorold and other officers loaded Paul into a police wagon. Thorold says he naively assumed the driver was taking the native man somewhere warm and dry. Instead, on a cold, rainy night, Vancouver police brought Frank Paul to a nearby alley where they left him, assuming they would later claim that someone at a nearby detox clinic would find him. A few hours later, Frank Paul was found dead of hypothermia. 2 Vancouver police officers were given 1- and 2-day suspensions, but Thorold says it seemed police didn't try that hard to investigate.
And I'm one of the principals, and I've never been interviewed. I mean, investigation 101. I mean, you have to interview all the principals.
Thorold's comments come just days after a report by a former BC judge concluded police often deliberately avoid digging too deep into complaints against their own.
Basically, there's a lack of motivation to really get to the bottom of complaints.
For Paul's family, there's now new hope that perhaps Thorold's comments will trigger another look at his death.
And I'm glad that that guard or that person who is coming out to speak about it, and I hope, you know, they will rethink again and maybe look at it again.
As for his own actions, Thorold says he's haunted by simply assuming Paul would be okay.
The fact that I told him he was going to be okay, right? I mean, that's really bothers me.
His hope, like Paul's family, is that even 8 years later, it's not too late for a public inquiry into his death, even though the province has already said no. Chris Brown, CBC News, Vancouver.
A major explosion and fire at an environmental and hazardous waste management plant prompted an evacuation earlier today. It happened in Thorold, Ontario, in the Niagara region. The blast happened around 6:15 this morning. More than 100 people were forced from their homes. Officials gave the all clear about 12 hours later. No one was injured. The cause is under investigation. Well, participaction is back. Some may remember it for its fitness drives or its quirky television ads. For 30 years, the program urged Canadians to get active. Today, the government resurrected it. And as Joanna Remiliotis reports, it's the same participaction with a few new moves.
It's a habit James Murray works hard at not breaking, no matter how cold out. 3 times a week, he's out on the rink with his 5-year-old Finley.
It's exercise for me. He gets, more drills on the ice, and we have a lot of fun.
Making fitness fun. It's an old adage that suddenly is new again. Participaction is bursting back on the scene with a $5 million boost from the government. The all-Canadian agency that promoted fitness, and no small measure of guilt, has been revived.
I am very pleased to announce to you that Participaction is back. It is time for everyone to get active.
Those with a few gray hairs may recall one of the iconic agency's earliest and most memorable ads.
The average 30-year-old Canadian is in about the same physical shape as the average 60-year-old Swede.
Beginning in 1971, Participaction continued to cajole Canadians off the couch for 3 decades, when in 2001, a victim of underfunding and government neglect, the agency finally folded.
We believe with a strong brand recognition, 75 to 80% of the adult Canadians, and good feelings towards that brand recognition, that's a tremendous asset.
Reviving Participaction was prompted by what experts call a crisis in Canadian fitness. The new and improved Participaction campaigns will target children under 12, as well as other vulnerable groups, and track their progress.
We'll be able to measure changes both in children and seniors and Aboriginals and those with disabilities.
Critics question whether spending public money can really make a difference, but this fitness expert says it can.
I think it's important that we act on that kind of social marketing front, as well as working at more individual levels.
At first I didn't even want to come here, and then I started having lots and lots and lots of fun.
The hope is, with a little push from Participaction, more Canadians, young and old, will feel the same way. Joanna Remiliotis, CBC News, Toronto.
Well, we have to take a short break, but coming up, They may be the faces of Canadian ballet, but Celia Franca was the spirit. The founder of the National Ballet died today at the age of 85. Sandra Abma now on the fierceness behind the grace.
All right. Should we go right from the beginning, s'il vous plaît?
A pioneer and taskmaster, an artist who insisted on excellence. And why not? Celia Franca could do it all. Teach, choreograph, dance, and lead. As the founder of Canada's National Ballet, Franca took a fledgling group of dancers and forged a world-renowned company.
Dance in Canada is synonymous with Celia Franca.
Yes! Franca was a mentor to budding stars Veronica Tennant and Karen Kane. But she was tough and intimidating.
Celia Franca's uncompromising standards were so high that for you to get anywhere close could and was often a terrifying experience.
She was a force of nature, absolutely a force of nature. Very, very funny, very biting wit, but very loving. It was a strange combination. You were never quite sure what you were going to get.
Franca knew firsthand that behind the artistry was a lot of hard work, and she didn't apologize for doing what she had to do to get results.
some dancers I used to treat very gently because I felt that psychologically they needed that kind of treatment. And other dancers, if I didn't give them a kick up the derriere, they wouldn't move. They were just lazy.
Celia Franca was born in London, England. She grew up to perform with London's famed Sadler's Wells Ballet, recognized for her dramatic, emotional interpretations. In 1951, she arrived in Canada with an encyclopedic knowledge of classical ballet. In less than a year, she launched the National Ballet of Canada in the auditorium of Eaton's department store.
Celia had the tenacity and the determination to found a great cultural institution and to support it until it was able to thrive.
Perhaps her greatest legacy is to Canada's future dancers. With Betty Oliphant, she formed the National Ballet School.
Celia was as passionate about dance on the last day of her life as she was when she first fell in love with ballet.
She was fiercely committed to young people.
Long after most people retire, she continued to guide young dancers at the School of Dance in Ottawa.
Everybody here refers to Miss Franca as our Miss Franca. Even though we're happy to share her with the world, we've thought of her as our Miss Franca for 28 years.
A life of determination, vision, and sacrifice that earned her respect and love on full display here at her 80th birthday party.
I know everybody talks about what a hard life the dancer leads, but if you have this obsession, you can withstand the pain and the hard work because it gives you back so very much.
Sandra Atma, CBC News, Toronto.
Big cities and heavy traffic seem to go hand in hand. What's being done about it depends on where you are. For the last few years, many Londoners have been paying a congestion fee. Starting today, even more will have to pay up, and some of them aren't very happy about it. Adrian Arsenault has more.
Oh, please wait while processing previous requests. So, we have a problem here. This is irritating. Let's start again, trying to pay the charge.
Grumpy is a heck of a way to start your Monday morning.
Well, it's a massive raid on our pockets, but
David Tarsh is ticked off because before simply driving into London, he must first fill out a government form and grab his credit card to pay the congestion charge. A 4-year-old municipal plan dinging drivers nearly $20 a day for heading downtown. It's supposed to deter them from even trying.
The London congestion charge zone has almost...
A measure the city considers so successful it is today doubling the size of the zone.
The idea is that it will make the streets and the air cleaner, which it won't.
Tarsh isn't a fan, but the City of London doesn't much care. With its high-tech system of cameras and calculations, it's led the way for other European capitals trying to cut congestion. Canadian cities look carefully, too, at the revenue generated and the roads reportedly cleared.
There's around about 20% fewer vehicles entering the charging zone.
And are they moving faster in the zone?
I'm not quite sure, sorry.
Are the speeds faster?
I'm not sure if the speeds are faster, are they?
He has to consult the PR representative standing by because it's a sensitive point. There may be fewer cars on London's roads, but many motorists argue the traffic jams aren't any better. There are more traffic lights and there's more construction to slow them down.
The traffic down here is just as bad as it normally is, and I think really it's just another tax, to be honest with you.
Do you mind paying this extended congestion charge?
Not really, no, because congestion is a problem.
So Londoners aren't sure how they feel about this and know only that an extended congestion zone is just the beginning. The government may start charging people for the kilometers they drive. And there's a proposal to slap a $60 daily fee on the drivers of high-polluting cars or SUVs, which is likely to make those who bring these into places like this wonder whether driving in London is worth it, which is, of course, the point. Adrian Arsenault, CBC News, London.
Just like Canada, the face of France is changing. But unlike Canada, there's a searing nationwide debate about the place of refugees and immigrants. In fact, the ruling party was counting on its hardline immigration policy to win votes. But what it wasn't counting on was a backlash. Teachers, social workers, neighbors of the immigrants and their families fighting back against what's being called Fortress France. Here's the CBC's Don Murray.
Once, months ago, fleeing their torn countries, they dreamed of better lives in a better world. Now, in northern France, where almost a century ago in the First World War men fought and died in trenches, they inhabit a new no man's land. They are refugees from Afghanistan, from Iraq, from Somalia, flames on the map. Here they live in mud and play soccer in the rubble. Untouchables, sullenly tolerated but no more by the French government. They still dream.
I want to go England. It's very hard to come in Canada. I cannot reach in Canada. As you know, as the people know, Canada is very far. We cannot reach there.
They are fed, but not by the state. A Catholic charity offers this food. Volunteers serve and try to keep order. Volunteers like Charles Hamazel, better known as Moustache. French police stalk them, arrest them, and dump them out of town, hours from Calais. The state would like them to disappear. It's not what Afghans like Joe Marakman expected.
I did not think that it can be this much difficult. We passed lots of countries, but we did not have this much difficulties. It is this place. The police have problem with us. Everyone, the people are good. I don't say the people are bad. The people are very good, but the only police has problem with us every day. We cannot walk on the streets. We cannot walk on the road. We cannot go to buy something from the supermarkets. If we go there, so they will say that they will follow us.
In late October, French police moved in and threw out 150 refugees sleeping in an abandoned warehouse just over there. Then they destroyed the warehouse, forcing those refugees to join all the rest sleeping on rough ground. There are anywhere from 200 to 400,000 illegal immigrants in France, but where Italy, Spain, and Germany have proceeded to wide-ranging amnesties for their illegal immigrants, in France the policy is now to throw them out. 20,000 expelled in 2005, up to 25,000